So I got 10:01 out here in BC, where I'm from. And so what I'd like to do is, get us started and just really, from the bottom of my heart, just say thank you. As a gay man who grew up many, many moons ago in the 70s, how leaders have led me in the past maybe has not been as consciously inclusive as it could have been. And to see now a commitment, but also a commitment in that we're still not there yet. We still have a lot of work to go. So a few things that I've just some assumptions. I'm going to assume that, and I'm not going to, in this session today, in the 1 hour that we have together, going to make the business case for why we need to be consciously inclusive for 2S LGBTQI plus communities. I'm going to assume that you already are there. And now it's the now what? It's the complexities of, even if we think that we are, everyone gets along, everyone sings Kumbaya and hugs trees and kiss puppies, that there's still a lot of work that we can do, right? Even if we think that we're consciously inclusive, there's still things that can help us level up. Right? We can always still continue to be better tomorrow than we were today. And that's going to be the premise of today. And by no means are we going to say, here's the playbook, go and run. This is a constant evolution. This is a constant co-creation together with, we have over 160 folks here in the room where we can co-create together. So big hello to everyone. Thank you so much for, I absolutely love this, and absolutely love the fact that we've got folks from all over joining us today. So thank you for that. Why don't we get started? And I definitely want to just do, very important. I know as we get started, it's important to understand the long-standing history that has brought us to reside on the land, and really to seek to understand our place within history. Land acknowledgements, they do not exist in past tense or historical context. Colonialism is a current ongoing process, and of course, we need to build mindfulness of our present participation. It's also worth noting that acknowledging the land is Indigenous protocol. So that said, today I want to respectfully acknowledge that I'm joining you, although many of us are joining, and it's clear from here that many of us are joining from all across Turtle Island, that I'm joining you from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded land of the West Bank First Nations of the Syilx Okanagan people, also known today as West Bank or West Kelowna, British Columbia. As part of my own personal commitment towards actively working towards reconciliation, so a few things, I've been definitely challenged by the elders here in West Bank to do a few things, move beyond just a performative land acknowledgement. And to that end, the encouragement is in working in collaboration and with the West Bank First Nations, engaging in educational efforts and integrating Indigenous perspectives and language into my own practice. And our encouragement is to put reconciliation into action, to make it an actionable behavior. I share a resource I use, Whose Land. So I not only facilitate remotely, but I travel all across Turtle Island. And whether I'm in Nunavut, Toronto or Victoria, I always will do a land acknowledgement. And I find the resource Whose Land. So the link is right there at the bottom left hand of the screen. I love it because it does wonderful things. So one, wherever I might be, especially if I'm on a land that I'm not familiar with, it provides me with more information about the land, the treaty if applicable. So one, increasing my own knowledge of learning and unlearning. But two, as well, allows me to create a more hyper-personalized, customized land acknowledgement. So if you're looking to add to your toolkit, it's one of many, a plethora of resources out there that I encourage leaders to start doing. So I haven't introduced myself yet, and I also have my colleague Jasmine as well. So my name is Matteo. I'm the Senior Inclusive Leadership Facilitator here at Diversio. A few interesting facts. So I've done 3 international TEDx talks, 1 in The Hague, 2 in the US. Don't want this to be a TED Talk. I really want this to be a robust conversation with now the over 200 folks that have joined us on this call today. And my background is in clinical behavioral sciences, so worked in healthcare for many years, in internal medicine and emergency, and now really hyper-focused on understanding and codifying the behaviors of inclusion and belonging, beyond just that it's warm, fuzzy hugs, but what are those behaviors and what do they lead to in terms of building highly inclusive and high-performing teams. That we don't just do this because it feels good, but it's also data-informed decisions, and we're really making the best decisions moving forward. And joining today is my colleague Jasmine. Jasmine, do you want to say hi and introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Matteo. And hello, everyone. Welcome to this amazing session. My name is Jasmine Singh, and my pronouns are she and her. I'm currently working with Diversio as the bilingual idea learning specialist. And I come from a very diverse background in higher education, training and facilitation, and as well as the immigrant serving settlement sector here in Canada. And my career has been dedicated to fostering inclusive and supportive environments for diverse communities. And I'm really thrilled to be able to be a part of this session and bring this passion to our conversations today. I look forward to engaging with all of you and contributing to our shared goal of creating a more inclusive and equitable workplace. Thank you once again for having me.
Awesome. Thank you, Jasmine. And Jasmine will too, if you are using the Q&A, if you're in the chat and I happen to miss something, Jasmine is going to definitely be there and also be here to also help facilitate the conversations that we're going to have today. Because as we move forward, this isn't going to be, like I said, we're not saying here's the playbook on what you need to do and there's a checklist activity. Instead, as we move forward, we're going to go into some very specific case studies and go, well, how would you respond? And we're going to different options. We're going to give, one where there's 4 options that we can pick, and we can pick and choose and maybe have a little debate and discussion around which of the 4 are the best. But of course, we know that in any situation, it's not just a, 4 scenario. There could be other options. So there'll be an opportunity for you to share what else you might do. It could be a combination of different options, or it could be something completely different. And then we want to definitely ground this in some of the wonderful work that our good friends at Deloitte did at, really codifying the behaviors of inclusive leaders and what they found with their 6 signature traits. And we'll talk about that, and that will be, really the gist. But the hope is that we'll have some really great discussion today on these, very typical scenarios that happen in the workforce. And how could we respond, right? And again, all thinking, and I'm going to assume that all of us are thinking that we want to be consciously inclusive. Then let's talk about, okay, what does that mean? How are we going to get there? So we're with Diversio, a little bit about us here on the screen, a global leader in diversity and inclusion solutions, working, spanning now over 35 countries. A little bit here about the platform and the training programs that we offer. For many of you who are joining us, who might have seen me before, might be saying, but oh, Matteo, I thought you were with CCDI Consulting, and Diversio has acquired CCDI Consulting as an absolute wonderful coming together of 2 organizations that are really now helping, leaders in how do we level up, right? How do we make data-informed decisions to really move forward, and what does that do? And we can really be a partner in your organization's success. So that's a little bit about us. I'd love to move us forward. Just a few things in terms of today. I want to just be very transparent that, there's going to be different levels of comfort and participation and expression today. And that's okay. I want to honor that because not everyone is at the same, same journey. Some people might be earlier on in their journey, and others might be more advanced. And I just want to be able to hold space for that, right? Some folks might see, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging as something that, oh, that's what HR does, or that's what the DEI folks do over there. And others who are like, no, as leaders, we all have a responsibility to become more consciously inclusive. We all have a responsibility, and everyone, and somewhere in between, right? And it is a continuum for many folks, and that's okay. As well, I just encourage folks, to come into this with a growth mindset. This isn't about finger pointing or guilt, shame, or blaming. This is really about what's the now what? How do we truly move forward? There is an option for a Q&A, and Jasmine will keep an eye on that in case I miss that. We definitely see the chat is absolutely lit. I love it, and because I'm talking quite a bit, I know Jasmine and my colleagues will be optioning that. You do have the option as well to show captions. There should be a button somewhere in that panel where you can show captions in case you need that from an accessibility. And I do want to encourage lots of questions, and definitely encourage that. So yeah, so a little bit, definitely use the chat, use the Q&A, and use the closed captioning. So what's on tap today? Well, I got a lot of questions around, sometimes we call it the initialism soup, right? And I was very particular about the initialism that I'm using for today. And there's a lot of different initialisms out there. So I would definitely want to talk about that. I'm not going to say that one is better than the other. I'm just going to talk about, why I chose to use this initialism, and just break that down for some folks. And then we'll talk a little bit about what is inclusive leadership. But then I really want to dig deep into discussing the 3 case studies that we have. And then there is an interactive session with live polling. And so we'll explain live polling. But I also want to set some context. So talking about this initialism soup, if you will, there's a lot of different initialisms out there. I have a lot of clients that use longer ones. I have other clients that use shorter ones, like they just might use LGBTQ. And I'm not saying one is better than the other. This is the one that I use. I also sit outside of my work at Diversio. I sit on the board for Canada Pride, which is a nonprofit that supports Pride organizations across Canada. And I've been doing some work with Interpride, which is another organization that supports Pride organizations globally. And, and even, with different Pride organizations, a lot of different, even Pride organizations use different initialisms, and that's okay. For me, as part of my commitment to truth and reconciliation, I put the 2S at the beginning. And so you can read the other ones, but I just want to speak to that for a bit, because I definitely want to really understand, why I choose this one. So the 2S stands for Two-Spirit, which I might assume that many folks might already know. But for those who don't, Two-Spirit, though, is not a term. So it's not a term that's interchangeable with non-binary. It is an umbrella term that specifically refers to Indigenous gender variant individuals who hold specific roles in their communities across Turtle Island. Prior to colonization, gender variant people were often revered in their communities, commonly responsible for maintaining very sacred traditions. But centuries of imperialism and colonization and persecution forced many Two-Spirit individuals to carry out their duties in secret. Now, the term Two-Spirit was coined actually very recently in the 1990s as a way to describe these identities and roles across one banner. The phrase itself is a translation of a Anishinaabe term, which directly translates to Two-Spirit. On the unceded land that I'm currently residing, the Nisilixian word for Two-Spirit is Stamia, which translates to the doe who grew horns. I absolutely love that, the doe who grew horns. And this beautiful term signifies the balance of both masculine and feminine spirits. Because Two-Spirits refers to specific cultural roles within Native communities, it's not the same as being Indigenous and trans, or Indigenous and non-binary, or Indigenous and queer. While Two-Spirit people can also be trans, queer, or non-binary, being Two-Spirit is its own category of identity. It's also important to note that non-Native people cannot be Two-Spirit, as it is culturally a specific identity. But as part of my commitment to truth and reconciliation, that's why I put the 2S at the front and include 2S in the initialism for communities. And that was another very distinct choice as well. And another one that I was challenged with, because often I see this, and I still see this today by so many well-meaning people, and even myself, where we might say community. And the reason why I say communities is a very determined choice is because I'm speaking about so many different diverse communities that have different needs, different intersectionalities, that especially when these folks, show up at work, might have different needs than myself as a cisgendered white gay male. I'm just someone who happens to be gay. But again, because of my intersectionality of being able-bodied, being neurotypical, not neurodiverse, and being, a gay man, I will have a very different lived experience. I still can have challenges. I can still have but I will have a different lived experience than folks from other communities that often get painted under one brush or one umbrella. But it's important to understand that although we use this initialism, that we are talking about so many different communities coming together. And it's again, an important reminder that, just to say that, we're one part of the community doesn't mean that I always understand. And also know that, my approach, how I might lead inclusively, I might adapt differently for someone who is trans or someone who's intersex, or, might be part of sexual and gender minorities that's not included in the initialisms that folks might use in their organization. So I just want to highlight that. So thank you for that. And so there's just additional, because again, I don't want to do this just because it's a feel good, but also, what is the data telling us? And we certainly have seen, the data tell us, that folks from this diverse set of communities are twice as likely as their heterosexual or straight employees to have experienced inappropriate behaviors at work. We also know, interestingly, the data for Gen Z, where now almost 30% of Gen Z identify as being part of these communities, which underscores, of course, now, how to be more inclusive. And there's a really interesting, and hopefully, and I see some, and thank you for sharing, just looking at some of the stats, but some really interesting work coming out of from our colleagues out in the UK that looked at, Gen Z employees will not hold space for an employer who is not consciously inclusive of folks from the 2SLGBTQI plus community. And so that's really interesting. So there are some behavioral changes and a change of expectation coming from the next generation. And so thank you. And I see that they're being dropped. So if you're interested, certainly take a look at that. But that said, I'd love to actually now, get into this. So if you are having your phone, get your phone out and scan the QR code. In fact, I'm going to do this so I can follow along, or you can go to polyv.com/IDMS, and the link is in the chat. And the first question should be coming up for you now. And that question is, what's one word you'd use to describe how you're feeling coming into today's session? So again, polyv.com/IDMS. This is a word cloud, so just one word. This is just one way to get us opened. And if that one word gets used more than once, you'll see that word getting bigger. The QR code is in the upper right-hand corner. So thank you. I almost need to have gravel as I watch this. We have so many folks here. That lots of words popping up. And I am not controlling how this is the live polling coming in. I love it. So definitely seeing curious coming up, but a lot of other words, and some folks saying unsure, and I just want to hold space for that. That's okay. Numb, tired, motivated, willing, eager, and I love this. So that's open, interested. Thank you. Really, I want to honor, everyone for sharing. So keep PolyV open because we are going to use it frequently as we move forward. That said, I just want to set some context for what we're going to talk about. Because I wanted to set the stage for when we're talking about inclusive leadership, what are we talking about? And I know earlier in the chat, if you didn't grab it, definitely get it. A wonderful article from our colleagues at Deloitte that took a look at, those leaders that are consciously inclusive. There were certain things that they did, but also coming out of the research, it was very clear that there was foundations of inclusion. And that if you truly wanted a high-performing team that felt that they belonged, that felt that they, were truly enabled to do their role effectively, first step you needed to have, and without it, you wouldn't be able to get the other two steps, is a foundation of fairness and respect, right? Really that element that, people felt that they're being treated, equally, there's equity there, and that was really, really important. The second step was, as leaders, and this is so important for us, is how do we set the table for folks to feel valued and that they belong? If anyone's familiar with Dr. Brene Brown, it was about this time last year where she released on her TikTok, where she talked about, through her research, where she just found the opposite of belonging. And this was a surprise for many, where the opposite of belonging in her research was that fitting in. Right. And imagine that. Imagine someone who's part of the 2SLGBTQI plus communities, who might have to mask who they are, they don't truly belong. They're masking, they're changing who they are. They're not showing up as their true authentic selves. And how important it is that if we truly want to get to the highest levels of inclusion, that we need to set the table for value and belonging, which means that we're not forcing people to fit in, but people can truly show up and belong and be their true authentic selves. But that wasn't the final step. And what they found in the research, and this was definitely duplicated as well with research out of Google with the Aristotle Project, but in order to truly have, at the foundations of inclusion, you needed to have that final step, which was how you created the conditions for high-performing teams to be able to speak up, to really curate psychologically safe, or at least safer, braver spaces and accountable spaces. And without that, so without fairness and respect, without value and belonging, without confidence and inspiration, you really weren't going to be there. And this is a lot of the work that we do here at Diversio is how do we measure that so that we can get to action plans to get us there. So that said, the other thing that came up in the article too that I just wanted to highlight was that there were 6 traits. So when we unpack these next case studies coming up now, we're going to look at, and I'm going to ask you to, think about, what of these 6 traits, right? Commitment, courage, both humility and bravery, being openly curious, collaboration, cognizance of bias, if you will, as well as understanding cultural intelligence, or understanding that there are different cultural frameworks or perceptual lenses out there. And that, the one that you might have, or the one that you're most familiar with, might not be the one that all other folks use. And it's important to understand that. And when we talk about culture, it's not just culture in terms of race, ethnicity, or place of origin, but that can also be, understanding, that people come from different work cultures, different work environments. People have different understandings of the way and lenses that they see the world. And so we'll unpack that, but let's get into these case studies. In these case studies, the very first one, I'll read it out, and just how they'll work is we'll read the case study, and then we're going to give 4 potential response options. Not saying that's it. And then you'll be able to vote on which of those 4. And we can have a little discussion in the chat, or just, robust discussion in the chat about, why we might have chose A, B, C, or D. But I'm not saying that A, B, C, and D are the only options. And then we'll have an opportunity after that then to look at, what else could we do? Right. And you'll be able to text in what else you might do. And then we can take a vote on, which of the 6 traits, we feel could be showing up for an inclusive leader. So just know after each case study, we'll read it. Then we'll have 3 poll EV slides, 3 live polling slides. The first one where you'll vote on 4 options. The second one where you can then, free form, type out a full sentence if you want. And then the third one where we'll talk about the 3 or the 6 signature traits, and you can pick as many, 1, none, or anywhere in between that you want to do. So, and I see there's lots of stuff happening in the chat, but I'm going to leave Jasmine to answer this. So thank you, Jasmine, as Jasmine's typing that out. But I'll take us through, and I'll read the first one. It's here, and this is around respecting pronouns. So the challenge: Sam, they, them, has approached you, their leader, and let you know that a few of their team members have not been respecting their pronouns. They have let you know that the team members have been corrected several times, and when corrected have said, it is too confusing and hard to remember. Interesting. As an aside, and I realize that we're coming in from all over Turtle Island, but here in BC, for those just for context, the BC Human Rights Tribunal, they awarded a decision. It was 30 grand in damages to a restaurant employee due to the actions of a coworker who repeatedly and deliberately misgendered them. It is interesting to note that the BC Human Rights Tribunal acknowledged that using proper names and pronouns of trans employees is not an accommodation, but a basic obligation every person holds towards people in their employment. Right. And so my colleagues have dropped into the chat an article just speaking to that one. So I just want to call that out. This is not about, should we or shouldn't we? I mean, clearly, and again, each jurisdiction has their own human rights tribunal, but, this is not up for debate. But now the question is, how do we respond? What's the best response? Let's get back into PolyV and just know that although on my screen that I'm showing and displaying, you might not be able to see all four, but when you're on your phone, you will be able to see the full sentence written out. So again, Sam say they approached you to let you know that a few of their team members have not been respecting their pronouns. And there's 4 options here. One is let Sam know that you understand how upsetting this might be, and then Sam should give their colleagues more time, as pronouns are still new to people. Report Sam's colleagues to HR. C, ask how Sam would like to be best supported while also sharing that you would be an advocate and ally for Sam. Thank Sam for sharing their concern, then go have a conversation with the staff who are misgendering Sam. And I'm seeing of the people who've responded so far, it looks like in the 80s, have picked C. About 15% are picking D. And we've got 1% picking the A. About 2% now. And so I'm seeing some folks also sharing in the chat as well. But I'm curious, I'm not too sure, which is, and I'm going to ask, what is the best way? I would, when I look at B, which, okay, we got 1%, reporting Sam's colleagues to HR. Yes, that's probably, might need to be done. But in the immediacy, is there, and the question is, can we do 2 options? And so, yeah, there could be, and I'm not saying that, it's one or the other, but I am seeing the majority, about 80%, picking C. And so I'm curious, for those that pick C, what was it about C that made it slightly better-ish than A, B, or D? And I'm curious, Jasmine, too, your thoughts on this one, right?
Absolutely.
Why? Yeah.
Absolutely, yes. I think as an inclusive leader, it's imperative to address such a situation with empathy and understanding, right? And a commitment
Yeah.
to fostering an inclusive and respectful workplace for everyone. So I would ask how Sam would like to be supported, right? While also
Right.
offering to be an advocate and ally for Sam, right? So as I mentioned, using right narrative is so important, but then emphasizing that respecting pronouns is not a matter of personal convenience, right? But a
Yeah.
fundamental aspect of professional respect and inclusivity. So we're not just talking about, just being able to say that, yes, this is unacceptable, but we're talking about human rights, right? We're talking
Right.
about upholding human dignity within the workplace. Over to you, Matt.
Yeah, excellent. And I'm seeing some things around, giving agency to Sam. So thank you for that. Taking Sam's lead's important. Asking how they would like to be supported, right? Including them, co-creating with them. I mean, yes, it still needs to be dealt with. Don't get me wrong. And whatever, and I get, different organizations will have different policies and procedures, and this might be a call for some organizations, right, to take a look at their policies and procedures on this and, the reporting, and maybe think about, have we built our policies and procedures, to be as consciously inclusive as possible? Is it possible that we can take a look at that? So it's not just that we always just run to HR each time, right? But are there things that, even if we're not in HR, that we can still do in advance of before we do, and also look at our policies and think, have we built these through the lens, of an individual who is trans? And I'm seeing some things around depending on the dynamic, right? He may get more training, gives them the option to express that they want the situation. So I'm seeing, oh gosh, I'm seeing quite a bit here, and again, there's also considerations. Again, I'm coming from a Canadian context. I'm also coming from a context in British Columbia, but we have some folks from the US here. And of course, there's other considerations to be put in here. But it's really interesting, and I'm seeing a lot of really great, lots of great messages. So I really appreciate that, there is some complexity here. So in this next slide here, how else might you respond? And I'm seeing some folks already in the chat have already responded, but this is an opportunity if folks don't want to, self-disclose in front of their peers or in front of, people that might know in the community. So model the behavior. Thank you. Yeah, take Sam's lead. So I'm seeing some really interesting and seeing some wonderful conversations happening in the chat as well. I love it. So the kids say that the chat is lit, and the chat definitely has been lit. It's been hard for me. So I'll definitely make sure, if I don't get to everyone's response, I know my colleague Jasmine is also taking a look there. Yeah, definitely an opportunity to review training and education. And that was actually when you break down the ruling from the BC Human Rights Tribunal, that was certainly one of the recommendations. And $30,000, I mean, for some organization might not sound like a lot, but this was a small restaurant in Gibson's on the Sunshine Coast in BC. And certainly, and what I also have heard is this has now also been a reputational issue for that restaurant. And they actually have seen business, unfortunately, drop significantly since the ruling and since it's come out. And so that's another consideration to have as well. So I'm seeing some things, yeah, and this could be, uncovering some more toxic behavior that might be occurring. Take Sam's lead, listen actively, allow Sam to have agency. So I'm seeing a lot of that. A good check-in with yourself to ensure yeah, right? So again, how often do we stop as leaders, even if we think that we're consciously inclusive? Have we stopped? I'll be honest, pronouns have been, as an older cisgender white man, it wasn't something net new. Oh, it's net new for me, and that's been a challenge for me as well, where I might not, use the right, and it's not by choice. It just is again something that I need to continue to work on. Yeah. But I think this last point, or this one of this points about be empathetic in all things. So definitely loving this. And I realize that some are coming in, but just for time, I'm just going to go into the next question. But I'm seeing lots of wonderful things showing up here. I'll just let this run for maybe a few more seconds because I realize now I'm asking you to type a full sentence, but I'm definitely seeing a lot of wonderful, wonderful things. Yeah, training and then schedule. Yeah, and yeah, one-on-one, right? So it's not just that, send folks to a generic training session, but to have that follow-up, that coaching, because we know, the research has clearly shown that the biggest change or impact to behavior, on-the-job behavior, isn't just sending someone to training, but it's that support that a leader provides post-training that can really help embed the behavioral change and can really help support that training. So thank you. Right. And so at this one point, they lent towards D because it's action oriented. Stating that you're just an ally seems vague. So you're right. So it's not to say that A, B, C, or D were one of those was the best all-inclusive answer, but it's important. But really, the point of this was to generate some discussion and conversation. Yeah, I like this change onboarding to reflect an emphasis on human rights, DEI, the expectations. Yeah, and going back to that the ruling, this was not just an accommodation. This was about honoring and respecting human dignity, which is an expectation for folks. Yeah, and a wonderful opportunity now to go back to our policies and procedures and take a look at them. I'm loving this. So hopefully this is, people have found this valuable. I've got some more scenarios I'd like to do. I don't want to hit the next button because I'm always like, there's going to be more golden gems. These are excellent. And I realize we've got 233 folks here on the call. I absolutely love this, but I am going to just move us forward. So if you didn't see yours come up, my apologies, but I'll definitely come back and take a look at this afterwards as well. But just in the interest of time, I am going to move the boat forward. But again, as I say that, I keep seeing more and more wonderful gems coming through. These are all excellent. So thank you. Yeah, making yourself more present, right? Yeah, and as Sam, I don't know, right? I just pulled this scenario, but this is a common scenario I get with a lot of my clients. I get this quite a bit often, right? I've had, folks refer to employees who happen to be trans, as it, or what are they going to want to be called? A cat? And at the end of the day, that's disrespectful behavior, right? And as leaders, are we setting the table for inclusion, right? In culture, is not the pizza parties or the foosball tables. Culture is the behavior that gets allowed, right? Just as the same as I wouldn't allow, a misogynistic comment to go unchallenged. I'm going to make sure that, and the reason I wouldn't do that is because I don't want, I don't want to set the table where that behavior becomes okay, but that becomes part of the culture when it is not addressed. So I'm just going to move us forward. So this next slide here, and you should be able to see the 6 traits, and really you're clicking on which of these 6 traits you feel you would be using as an inclusive leader: commitment, courage, curiosity, collaborate, and you can click as many as you want. In fact, I'm seeing now, okay, now this is really open this up into lots of different things, and I can't even tell you how many, but I'm seeing definitely, yeah, an opportunity really for quite a few options I'm seeing. And really interesting question: what if a person chooses not to select the pronouns and yet the organization mandates that they must? It's interesting, and again, this will depend on which jurisdiction, the individual who just asked that question, what in jurisdiction you're in. I certainly know for myself in BC, it's not even whether it's mandated or not. At the end of the day, it's basic human respect and respecting the human dignity of the folks. And as an employer, we have a responsibility for us to be able to set the table. So I encourage, folks to make sure that they're up to date in terms of, what is the current legal precedents. That said, even taking the legal precedent aside, the question I have to reframe that is, as an organization, what is your commitment to your team? Is your commitment the bare minimum in terms of what is just a legal requirement, or are you committed to setting the table as inclusively as possible? Are you committed to setting the table free of discrimination and where everyone is valued and respected? And that is a different reframe, right? And so, and to the point in terms of mandatory pronouns, I would personally, this is my personal, I'm not saying this is diverse, but is I would never force someone to have to share their pronouns, or put it in their email signature. I choose to, because part of my commitment is setting the table to be more consciously inclusive. That said, if an employee comes to me and says that they now use they, them pronouns, or that their name isn't Alice, but it is now Alessandro, I'm referring to them as them, and I'm referring to them as Alessandro. I will not dead name them, out of respect that I view all humans with human dignity. But I'm not going to force someone if they don't want to. That is, they don't have to disclose. But if someone does disclose, then I will respect that. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I think that's more where I'd love to frame, and to the point here, that these traits are really what leads to psychological safety. And that's really, and it was really interesting too, if you look at the study, the Aristotle study that Google did, when they were trying to find what were the common traits of high performing, high inclusive teams that had high levels of inclusion, high levels of feeling valued and belonged, and outperformed, the only trait, the only common behavior was the team commitment to psychological safety. That was the only common denominator. Very interesting, and of course, as the epitome of innovation and growth, Google has been at one of the top organizations there. It's really interesting. That was the only one that in the 2-year study that they did, the only common denominator was the creation of psychological safety. So that said, I think we're ready for our next one. And this is intersectional identities and microaggressions. So this one, you're in an open work environment and you overhear Mark, he, him, who's on your team, say the following to Aisha, she, her. Hey, congrats on coming out. It must have been so hard telling your family you're bisexual since you are Black. How did your family react to the news? Did they kick you out? Now, I'm going to go on assumptions here, and you can read that again. I'm going to assumption that Mark probably wasn't intending to, engage in a microaggression with Aisha. Probably had the best of intentions, potentially, right? Really was like, congratulations. This is not being facetious. This is someone I'm going to assume, has, the best intention of heart, but maybe the intention doesn't equal the impact. But congratulations on coming out. But then started really tying into the intersectional identity of Aisha, talking about, being bisexual and being a racialized individual. And then, inquiring about the family, which I'm not saying that we shouldn't become genuinely curious about our coworkers, but it's interesting that immediately Mark went to, calling out her race and calling out that, they must have been hard, right? So immediately going there. So we've got a few different options. Again, you're not going to be able to read all the options here on the screen. If you are on your phone, you might have to do this. I don't know what we call it, scroll just to refresh to get to them. So option A, immediately call out Mark and let him know that asking these questions is out of line and not acceptable at work. B, make eye contact with Mark and shake your head so Mark and everyone present knows that you're not pleased, and then bring the situation up on your next one-on-one meeting with Mark. C, gently redirect the conversation and later when alone with Aisha, ask how she would best like to be supported, or go find your HR business partner, let them know the situation, ask for guidance. So I'm not saying any of these situations or any of these options, A, B, C, or D, are wrong necessarily. But again, I'm seeing, with this group today here, with 229 folks in the room, I'm seeing, the majority of the room folks picking C. So I'm seeing somebody here share that they had a similar situation and that they did C and things went great. They were able to talk to the Mark and a one-on-one after and to have the conversation, right? Because again, I'm going to assume that Mark had the best of intention, right? And so I'm just curious, I'm seeing some more things coming into the chat, why folks maybe have picked, and maybe I might have done a combination. One of the, there's always different options that you can choose when you are, calling out to microaggression. You can just completely avoid it. You can do, maybe either redirect it, or you can, directly call that behavior out. And I'm not saying, because they all have pros and cons, and a lot of different considerations need to be made here. Yeah, and someone also shared, that the person might not have even realized that this was a microaggression. Again, because again, we sometimes come from, very much from, Mark, who I'm going to assume might be from, I'm going to make an assumption here, might be from one of the more dominant groups on the team, maybe is, a cisgendered white male as well, coming from a place of privilege and not understanding, the impact for someone who looks differently, presents differently than he does, and has a different lived experience. But I love this line here that we could take it as a learning opportunity. So thank you. Yeah, and I see another point around B, because even if we have the best of intentions, they have to know that you just can't, how do we correct this behavior? So I'm not, again, saying that any of these are the best, but there could be a combination of these, or there could be more. So in the next slide here, an opportunity for us, how else might you respond? So again, this is an opportunity to think, okay, what else could we do? Right. And I love this, understanding that even if you have the best of intention, the impact, and it's important for us to understand the impact, right? And again, the impact to me as a white man who might experience microaggressions, it's going to have a very different impact to somebody else who might experience those microaggressions that have a macro impact on a daily basis, multiple times a day, not just at work, but outside of work. And we have to honor and hold space for that. yeah, educate them on the impact and repercussions of their actions. Another one too is as ask Mark. One of the things I like to say is, Mark, I used to think that as well, but since then I've learned, right? And where I used this recently is one where I was at a client site and they had ordered a bunch of pizza boxes and stuff, uh, and it was all, of course, all men, and someone said, oh, just leave that. And I said, I used to think that too, just leave that, right? But I've since, learned that that often it's always put on based on gender to women to do the pickup. And so now part of my commitment in creating and breaking down gender barriers is I will pick up the boxes and not just expect that someone else will do that. But I use that, I used to, but now I've learned, and this is my approach. And I like that approach. And that's an approach we certainly can use with Mark. Mark, I understand you probably have the best of intention. I used to share that as well. But in doing that, we need to understand that this individual might have a different lived experience. So the question is, does adding I used to do that show empathy? And there's some research there that shows that, because part of this is building bridges. And again, assuming that Mark had the best of intention, that did not intend to cause harm. It's one way, because often when people get called out, they don't take the behavior and them out of the equation. And often they see that as a personal attack on them or a personal attack on their values. And part of what I'm trying to do is soften the landing so that we're distinguishing between behavior and you as an individual. And so we're not saying that you are wrong, you're a bad person. No. What we're saying is you're still a great person. This one behavior needs to be corrected, and here's why. But how we do that is important as we move forward. So I'm seeing a lot of wonderful things coming up here. Thank you for this. Following up on C, be supportive to allow space for agency. Tell Mark in private, right? Because calling someone out in the moment can really put them on the spot, right? Especially if they've never been called out before. Another thing too that I work with my clients is, how do we build the skill set of calling in and calling each other out as well? If we're the initiator, how do we help our team build the skill set of receiving constructive feedback? Often lots of folks are really great at receiving positive feedback, but receiving constructive feedback, especially constructive feedback about behaviors, which too often gets tied into their value as a human being, can be taken the wrong way. And often I find a lot of the schools, I know when I went to university, they did not prepare me for how to receive constructive feedback. And when you think about your teams, is how open are they to receiving constructive feedback, even when receiving constructive feedback when it's not from their, from a place of positional power, but from a colleague or a peer. And that's important too. So that's one of the things I work with my clients is, how do you build that skill set to not only call someone in and call someone out, but also to receive that feedback. So I love this, and I'm loving I'm letting folks just read as these come in. And to this point, racism is not it's a systemic issue that affects, and that's another thing too, is often people think, but I'm not racist, I have a Black friend, or I'm not homophobic, that doesn't mean that you still can't engage in behavior that is discriminatory or that is not inclusive. And to the point you're wondering why we're assuming, I'm just assuming for this, for the purpose of this. But if he didn't, that's a completely different conversation that you need to have with your team, and really talk about fit for team if someone is openly engaging in racist, misogynistic, homophobic behavior, or let's call it out, disrespectful behavior in the workplace, right? And that might speak to a culture that doesn't matter what the stated values are, what the stated policies are, but what those behaviors that get allowed and encouraged are, and that's might be an area that folks need to work on as well. But this is, how can we use this as a learning opportunity? I appreciate your friendship, but this is Aisha's story to tell. And I'm loving this. So thank you, everyone, for this robust conversation. I realize we only got 10 minutes left. I had some more But I have one more that I'd like to get to. So again, this is just which of these 6 traits might we be using? And I'm seeing, I saw some messages too that, these are all traits leading towards, building or curating a psychologically safe, or at least safer, brave, or at least a braver and a more accountable workspace, which is what we need to get to if that's what we truly want, is a space where people feel that they not just fit in, but they truly belong. So thank you for that. So in our last case study, that I want to present. And again, funny enough, I had a lot more, but I realized I did not have enough time to do this. But I'm loving this engagement, and I love that this is not just me. So this one's a bit more challenging. So Kapil, he, him, tells you that a new employee approached him saying that they wanted to find out about company benefits for gender affirming care. This employee was told they would need to speak to their manager first, because that is our policy. However, this employee is not out to their manager and doesn't know how to proceed. As Kapil's manager, you ask, who is this employee? But Kapil says he isn't comfortable revealing who asked. So again, Kapil, and I'm assuming you are Kapil's leader. Kapil's a benefits administrator. And this is a topic I hear from a lot of folks, who are early on in their transition, where when I say struggle with, how do you, one, come out at work that you're transitioning? 2, how do you, if there are employee benefits that are geared towards gender affirming care, how do you even ask about that, inquire about that, right? Do you go to HR? Right. And does HR then, and then what I hear is that fear that, HR is going to go and tell their manager, oh, hey, you have someone. And then it creates this potential cycle or a potential barrier to be able even to access these benefits, or to even truly, show up as their true authentic self. But interesting here where, Kapil's like, oh, I don't know quite what to do here, right? The policy is clearly saying the person needs to speak to their manager. But now, maybe we didn't write the policy understanding that maybe, someone might not be comfortable going to their manager first. And now I'm Kapil's manager saying, well, who is this employee? I want to go speak to them. But Kapil's like, hey, I'm not ready yet to reveal who it is. So again, this is a bit more interesting, a bit more dynamic. And so again, there's 4 options that we have present here. If you're on your screen, you might just have to scroll down to get the different options, and you won't be able to read all the options here, but you can read them once you're on your phone. A, tell Kapil that he can tell the person that the policy is clear and they'll need to have a conversation with the manager first. Policies are policies. I hear that a lot, having worked in HR myself. Tell Kapil that the person can come to you and you will help them have this conversation with their manager so they feel supported. Then ask this employee how we can adapt our company benefits policy. Thank Kapil for respecting this person's privacy. Arrange for a third-party representative from the benefits company to speak with the employee directly. Then recommend a review of all benefit policies to ensure an inclusive report, or just go tell your boss, let them know the situation, ask for guidance, right? And so let's see here, see some of the responses. So this one I'm seeing 94% are going with C. And again, I'm not saying that one is that any of these are wrong, and not saying that any of these are the most correct or is the correct one, but I am seeing some agreement with this group here that we have C, right? Right, because going to your boss, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that, and that could be some guidance, that could be, but I think definitely there's agreement that we're not just saying, hey, policies are policies, just deal with it. I could see some folks maybe being hesitant for B, because now we don't know what our relationship is with this individual. We don't even know who this individual is. And now are we just asking this individual to come to yet another HR person? Because it doesn't matter whether your benefits or, recruitment, they see HR as all one department. And again, still that fear of, okay, what conversation will you have with my leader? Is my role safe, right? And these are valid concerns. And so interesting. And I'm seeing a lot of Yeah, and there's some interesting points here about, insurance company and not being able to understand. And this is net new. I have quite a few clients that do work in the benefits and in insurance, and it becomes very interesting. Even their own computer systems are not set up for, the different non binary individuals, and so they can't even code it in their systems. So there's still lots of work that needs to be done. So I'd love to know, I'm just going to go to the next question, is what else could we do in this situation? How else might we respond? But I'm seeing a lot of debate here. And I'm hoping that through this is an opportunity again for us to come thinking, right? Thinking about when we wrote these policies, whose lens did we write this policy? Whose voice wasn't present when we were drafting these policies and procedures, right? Who else could be there? Because again, we might not have a lot of folks take us up on this, but this could be a differentiator from a lot of organizations. And a lot of the work that I'm seeing now, especially with the next generation, is they are looking at, not just how inclusive overall, but they're looking at how, trans inclusive an organization is, even if that individual isn't trans. That could be seen as whether or not this is even an organization that is a fit for them, right? Back in my day, a lot of, universities would prepare you for how do you write your resume, how do you write your cover letter. Now they're preparing the next generation, the universities, is how do you evaluate that organization's true commitment beyond just having a performative checkbox. We have a commitment statement on our HR page or on the hiring, the job posting. But when you sit down with the HR business partner who does a pre-screen, what questions can you ask to truly vet the organization's true commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging? And then when you get your, sit down with the hiring manager, what questions can you ask the hiring manager? And so these are all interesting things. And thank you. Thank you for this. And I realize we've only got a few minutes left. And so I'm just going to just again, thank everybody so much for this wonderful opportunity. And I really appreciate an interesting question around how we can foster inclusivity for everyone, right? And that's, again, something that is important for us to take a look at. And one of the things I encourage is to sit down and look at the entire life cycle of an employee, not just, how do we get them into the boat in that recruitment phase, but how do we encourage, job assignments inclusively? How do we encourage leaders to provide feedback more inclusively? And these are all things. So I realize that I've run out of time for many folks, so I want to just appreciate and honor that. Thank you so much. I know I will stay online in case anyone has any additional questions that you might have. I always love to know, what landed for you into today's session. If you want to stay in touch, I know my colleagues will share our contact information. In fact, I'll stay online in case there's any questions. I'm seeing lots of activity happening here. And I'm going to take it now a look. So here's some more information. If you do want to book a demo with us, there's some more information here. Are there any questions in here? My apologies. This is one of the reasons why I had Jasmine. Racialized and queer intersectionality affects other margin. Yes, other than Indigenous people, such as Black trans women being targeted more often than other communities for hate crimes. Do we know if there are intersectional communities similar to Two-Spirit communities and other non-white racialized communities? Interesting. Yeah, and I think the first question here that's coming in, that we're still needing to better understand the intersectionality and the impact. I will share. So one of the interesting studies one of our clients has been doing is looking at performance review, and we know that there is a discrepancy in the amount of feedback provided, the amount of actionable feedback. So not just you did a great job, but here's what you did, here's what you can do to improve. So that constructive feedback using like a what, so what, now what model. And what they found was that leaders, one, if the leader shared a similar dimension of diversity, high levels of comfort level in giving feedback. But if the person they were giving feedback to did not share similar dimensions of diversity, the feedback or the comfort level dropped significantly. we know, and this is given duplicate in many studies, but in their study, they found that white men received far more items of actionable feedback on their performance review than women. In particular, racialized women received, in this one study that they did, negligible. In fact, it was insignificant, the amount of actionable feedback that they were provided. And this wasn't a small number. This was a data set of over 40,000 performance reviews that they observed. And so I share that because it's important to, we might all think we all get along. We might have all this great work that we do on the front end to get people, to be more consciously inclusive in our recruitment process. But not a lot of studies have been done on what is the impact, especially that intersectional impact on things like performance reviews and feedback, which I think we all agree is an important step to move forward in someone's career, not just getting positive feedback, but also getting that constructive feedback. And so that could be something we need to elevate as well, comfort level in providing feedback. And two, actually giving more constructive feedback and anonymous feedback. So how can we foster inclusivity at the entry level? Again, this is going to be different for every organization, but one that I encourage folks is to take a look at. How often do we sit down and listen? One of the things I really, really love with Diversio is when we unpack in our employee surveys where we can get a lot of this data. And, especially in those listening activities where we can start listening and go, yeah, right, we never even thought of that because we never asked folks, what are some great things that we could do? If someone's not comfortable sharing their pronouns, how should I refer to them? I always use the first name, right? And I have asked if someone isn't sharing, but to the point, yeah, I would just use their first name, and then I would default to using they. Awesome. So thank you. Hopefully we answered all the questions that come in. I'll stay on for just another few moments in case anyone has other additional questions coming in. But I'm seeing lots of messages, and I haven't been able to get to everything. So thank you, Jasmine. Thank you so much for watching it. I have to literally take my glasses off to read, but I have to put them on to actually read my notes. So I really want to thank everybody. Yeah, and interesting question about how do you respond when someone tells you that it's not proper grammar to refer to them, they. Have you read Shakespeare? I could give you so many literal examples from the literary world where we use they to refer to a single individual. And this is not something net new. And so again, looking back, and again, that's in English, right? But I have clients that work, for the Paris Olympics and for the Milan 2026 Winter Olympics, and it becomes a little bit different in both the French and Italian languages in using non-gendered pronouns. And so this is interesting. And again, English is its own dynamic in terms of how we speak. At the end of the day, it's about respecting the humanity of everybody that works. That is what I come to. So we're going to make mistakes. Be okay with making mistakes as long as we acknowledge, improve, and move forward with changed and better behavior.
And
Yeah,
I just want to add something here.
Oh, please do. Yeah.
I just want to add something here that it's so important. And you made a pivotal point here because there's no communication if there's no clarity, right? So if you're unsure of something, just ask. I think it's that simple, right? Instead of assuming, right? That's what I wanted to add.
And to the point, it's not improper grammar. But again, not everyone, passed English, or, maybe in a few years since they took English, right? And I get that, right? And there could be some also underlying potential biases based on, upbringing, based on previous lived experiences, based on that individual's, own perceptual lenses or cultural framework in which they see the world. I want to hold space for that. But at the end of the day, we also have to understand that we hold space for respecting folks in the workplace, right? And so if someone is going to come and make racist, transphobic, homophobic, sexist comments at work, there is consequence for behavior, right? There's always an opportunity to use that as an opportunity to learn and grow. And when you have folks that engage in behavior that is continually disrespectful and disregard, our framework for working in a respectful, that then becomes a very different conversation. So could you say that again? It's about, yeah, I would say it's about, respecting humanity and human dignity. At the end of the day, in fact, let me pull up, we had that wonderful article. And I'm just going to cut and paste this. And this is directly from the ruling that about that one court case that it was an Italian restaurant in Gibson's in the Sunshine Coast in BC. But this is from, and I love the way that the BC Human Rights Tribunal worded this. Like a name, pronouns are a fundamental part of a person's identity. A primary way that people identify each other using correct pronouns communicates that we see and respect a person for who they are, especially trans, non-binary, or other non-cisgendered people. Using the correct pronouns validates and affirms they are a person equally deserving of respect and dignity. And I think that's where we, that's where I'm coming back to, is grounding that, when we talk about respect, we're not talking about respect for positional power. We're not talking about respect for, that an achievement such as, you won the gold medal. We're talking about respect for humans, human to human respect. And that's the respect that we're referring to here. So hopefully, I know my apologies, I cannot read all the, but I really is where you reintroduce, offer the inclusive leadership certificate. Yeah, that's a really great question. And for the individual who asked that, I know here at Diversio, we do have quite a bit. I facilitate a lot of inclusive leadership work. I know that is something that, so definitely let's keep in contact, and I'll encourage my colleague who's on here as well under the Diversio Time CCDI webinar to get your contact, and we can certainly connect about that. Yeah, around this speaking defensively, and to me it's around how do you separate that this is not about just sitting and defending. Or understanding that when people become defensive, it's because they see this as an attack on their core value, their core beliefs. And that's why, making that bridge is important. At the end of the day, though, we have to make a decision in our workplace, what we are going to accept and not accept. What is the culture? Beyond just football tables and pizza parties, but what are the behaviors that are acceptable and not acceptable? And we have to be very clear on that. But it's really interesting. Yeah, and again, this is a decision that folks have to make, especially in the service industry, right? But when we look at that one article, or not one article, but when we look at the decision that was made with one restaurant here in BC, it didn't matter that the individual that was not respecting was not that individual's leader. That was a coworker. Even though it was reported to the leader did nothing. So that behavior was then encouraged. By not encouraging the behavior necessarily and saying, please disrespect this individual, but by not addressing it, they were then giving free rein for that behavior to continue. And so in doing so, that's why the restaurant itself was fined, in this case, $30,000. So quite a significant that. But yeah, we should have more conversations. Definitely, and I definitely love to continue this conversation. So yeah, we're at 8 minutes past the thing, and we could still talk. I actually had another case study that I wanted to get to as well, but we had to pull that just because of time, because there was such great in-depth conversation for folks. And I'll definitely be going back to looking at some of the Q&A and looking at the chat that I might have missed, because it was coming in so fast. It was hard for me to talk at the same time as facilitate. So big cheers to Jasmine and to my colleague, our marketing colleague who is on here as well. So thank you everyone so much.